Okay, so Undertale and Deltarune. They're a pair of games I've made my fair share of videos on over the months. but that's not going to stop me from making more, and here I have a theory video. Oh, and of course, full-blown spoiler warning. I'm going hands on with this. I'm not gonna keep anything secret, okay? Hey, there's a bit of content that goes here that I cut because I thought it would go better in a different video, and yeah, the audio that comes after this, I couldn't chop that up in a way to make it not seem awkward, so pardon. In addition, there's another case with monsters and humans and their souls that is a bit of a plot hole. So humans can intake monster souls and monsters can intake human souls, right? But here's the thing. It takes 7 human souls for one to be strong enough to break the barrier, which is the magical things, the magical border sealing the monsters underground, right? So that only takes 7 human souls, right? And when Asriel Dreamer gets 7 human souls, or the power of 7 human souls anyway, and or even when Just Flowey gets six human souls and then becomes Omega Flowey, they've become godlike beings with, well, godlike amounts of power with less than 10 human souls. What has stopped this many people from coming together to exert this much soul power in the history of the world with their souls and all that? You know? Like, this is not a lot of human souls in the grand scheme of things. There's more than 1 billion times the amount of human souls in the real world, assuming that souls existed anyway, than it would take to break the barrier. Like, there's 8 billion people, you get the point, right? So I have a couple theories to try and explain this little plot conundrum, and yeah, I'm gonna say them. The first theory I'm gonna talk about is what I call soul compound theory, okay? So to do this, I'm gonna have to do a little bit of basic mathematics. Don't worry, it's nothing more than addition, right? So I'm gonna have to actually give a numeric. So to explain this, I'm gonna have to give a numeric value to the various souls' power, right? So since monster souls are the weakest souls we're shown in the game, I'm going to give them a soul power of 1, just because that's a basic unit and it's not really divisible in any way meaningful to us, right? So it takes almost the entire population of monsters to create the power to create the same power as 1 human soul. So if we can get a firm amount of population of monsters, then that means that we have a rough idea of how much how much the soul power of a human soul is, as it's that number, seeing as a monster soul has the soul power of 1, right? So estimating based on the game, we kill like what? 110 or is 90 100 110 people in the genocide run. There are some people who are underground. A minimum viable population of humans is like 190. So estimating off of all that, I'd say that there's like maybe 150 monsters, or maybe if they're a higher proportion of the population were spared by hiding in the true lab, then maybe it's 200 monsters. Because that's above a minimum viable population, I'm going to say 200 for sake of simplicity. And because this is already an estimate to begin with, I'm not going to account for the fact that there's 5 more monsters and it takes to equal the power of 1 human soul. So from there, I'm going to assign the soul power of 200, right? So then, if a monster takes a human soul, or a human takes a monster's soul, that should mean that their soul power is now the sum of that. So either it's so 200 plus 1 is 201. My theory here is that Asriel Dreamer is vastly more powerful than the sum of the 7 human souls. So 7 times 200 is 1,400, right? My theory is that the soul power wielded by Asriel Dreamer is more than 1,400, because the power of each soul is made stronger by the fact it's in the same body as other souls. That is a way to explain this, but I think I have a better way to explain it. You see, there are some problems with soul compound theory, mainly that there's no direct evidence for it besides that it would fix some plot holes. So I have another theory, right? So I'm going to start explaining that now, okay? So in the true lab, right, we can find VHS tapes of Asriel and Kara playing together before the whole tragedy that set off the game's whole well, it didn't set up the you know how it is if it's complicated and all, right? But there's a VHS tape of them together. This implies that VHSs existed in the underground before when Ezreal ended up getting killed, right? And it's also referenced that most of the technology in the underground is human technology that got littered and then fell down in the waterfall. Now, in the real world, at least, the VHS tapes are something that was invent. They were invented in the. They were used. They were their main prominence was in the 80s and not the 80s, but their main prominence was in the 90s and like the early 2000s, and they were not invented. They were invented around that time, I presume. At the very least, they weren't. At the very least, they weren't something from centuries and centuries ago at that time. So that would imply that Asriel and Kara, their whole thing didn't happen hundreds of years ago, but in fact, just a couple decades ago. Or maybe it happened 100 years ago, because again, there's a whole thing with like 2010X, and then it's like, oh, but then if you analyze it closely, actually that's when Kara fell into the underground. Yada, yada, yada. You get the point, besides the point. So, yeah. So that means, but if Kara fell into the underground in the 2010s, and then Azrael took their soul and then went onto the surface to bury them in the 2010s, then that would mean that the super powerful basically, you know how Azrael got killed by the human's strongest weapons that they attacked him with, right? If Azrael went to the surface in modern times, do you know what that weapon would have been? Yeah, a gun. So I have another theory being that maybe a monster with a single human soul, well, very strong by ancient standards, similar to a knight, is no match for modern weaponry like firearms and shit. Maybe that also applies to Azrael Dreamer. Maybe while Azrael Dreamer and, for that matter, Omega Flowey are incredibly strong, again, a gunshot could take them out. Like, they're very strong, but they aren't really gods in any way. They're just really strong compared to people without tools or with basic tools. And you may then ask, oh, what about the whole timeline resetting thing? Okay, well, I'd argue that this isn't actually a feature of Souls at all. I'd argue this is a feature of the player. When the soul, bear in mind that Kara is a person, not Kara, Chris, not, I tripped up on that, I fucked that up multiple times there. Frisk is a person who exists in the universe who has a soul. I think this red heart is Frisk's soul, and that we, the player, are in fact just an external entity that's kind of more intangible, and that we, in fact, are the ones with the power to alter the timeline, and then also that Flowey has the power to alter the timeline. Bearing in mind that Flowey himself is a bit of a weird paradoxical being. You know, Flowey canonically has no soul until he takes the soul of others, because his original soul was destroyed when he was killed the first time, right? Although there's actually a problem, because in Deltarune we're explicitly shown the soul being us, because when Chris rips us out, then suddenly they're in control again and we're not, so that's pretty solid evidence that we are, in fact, the soul, as opposed to an intangible external being. So, that's a bit of a major knock against this theory here. So, maybe not, but, I think it explains it better than soul compound theory, although it does have some holes. So yeah, although then again, if the soul is us, then that would mean a single human soul can reset the timeline. Which, well, why aren't all the souls of all the other humans on the surface doing the timeline? Is this evidence for the theory that most of the humans are dead or something? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know, but is it not supposed to be thought through this hard? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe we've become maybe Chris has another soul in addition to the soul which they rip out. Maybe which we're tied to. Maybe not. I don't know. I'm just spitballing. I say as if I'm not making a whole video out of this and editing it and uploading it and having people watch it. I don't know. Well. And upon consulting this with friends, I've come to no fruitful results. The only thing I've gotten is one of my friends being like, well, actually, they need to be in the same vessel, the same body, for them to actually be connected and together, and it's like, still, if humans and monsters lived together on the surface before the war, how come that, never happened? You know, it's not really a satisfying answer, but that's all I really have, typically, I think when you make an essay or a video essay or whatever the fuck, you're supposed to have a conclusion. I don't. I just have two theories, both with problems. I guess my previous bit of audio is our conclusion, so I should probably just cut the tape here and start the fucking outro. Hey. So yeah, now it's the intro. If you enjoyed the video, hit like. It helps me and costs you nothing. Please, if you want to see more, subscribe so YouTube's more likely to show it. If you want active notifications, then go into the bell, get its menu and say all notifications or partial notifications or you get the point. So yeah, that's the whole thing. This 10-minute long video may or may not have taken 2 weeks to make. I'm a mess. I mean, I'm on summer holidays, so theoretically I have more time, although, honestly, the fact honestly, when I have school, I might just be better at functioning faster and on making videos, but it's like, I've got to get it done the weekend, because that's when I have time, whereas in the summer holidays, I continually procrastinate. I don't know. I mean, my upload schedule throughout the summer has been pretty inconsistent. If you look at it since the video on Mario Bros. Wonder, which was the first video in the summer, then you'd see my point. This is like the fourth video in the summer, and I have school again in a week. So, God, I hope there isn't too much saliva sounds getting into this audio. Sorry if there is, people. But yeah, admittedly, like last week, I did have a sore throat at the end, so there was a reason not to work. There's still more audio that needed to be done, albeit not all the audio. Really, I really should have started editing then. I don't know. Well, I am trying to enjoy life in the summer without school while it lasts, okay? So, peace, eh?